So we are going to start the next session. My name is Takujo Okamoto. I'm a historian of science. I'm not a scientist, I'm a humanist historian. And working at the University of Tokyo, I work as the moderator for the Professor ÖQUIST session. Our next session is going to be the lecture of Professor ÖQUIST, Gunnar ÖQUIST. Professor ÖQUIST is the plant physiologist, and his specialty is the study of photosynthesis, especially that of the cyanobacteria. Professor also worked as the secretary of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. Probably all of you know that Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences is the awarding body, awarding institution of the Nobel Prizes in physics and chemistry. So Professor knows quite well about the actual handling process of the nominations and also the selecting procedures of the Nobel laureates. Actually, this is the second time for Professor ÖQUIST to come to Japan. He was here. He was in Tokyo when the third Hope meeting took place in Tokyo. And he was in Tokyo when that earthquake occurred on March 11th. So I'm personally very happy that despite that supposedly horrible experience, Professor has accepted to come to Japan again and then give us lecture again. If you're ready, please start.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Okamoto, for the introduction. And I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting me back again to this Hope meeting. In my talk, I will give you a break from chemistry. I'm not going to talk science. I'm going to talk about science. And the title of my talk is Fostering Breakthrough Research. I have an outline that I will follow. I will talk about that today we have unprecedented challenges to mankind, very much due to the global issues. I will talk about the nature of scientific research and give you a picture of the breadth of what we define as research. And I will also, as mentioned, talk a little bit about the Nobel Prize and how we work in the committees. And I will finish by discussing requirements to facilitate real breakthroughs in scientific research. But I will begin by sharing with you a true story that more or less will summarize my message today. On the 6th of June, 1761, the Danish engineer and astronomer Carsten Niebuhr, he was aboard on a Danish ship. Carsten, he was a young scientist, maybe a little bit older than you are, but still a young man. The ship was a warship, because this was time when it wasn't all that safe to be on the sea. But anyhow, the ship had to prepare for war, and everybody on the ship was very focused. They were very busy making the ship ready to make the first strike against the approaching enemy. And the approaching enemy happened to be an English warship. Denmark and English were not at peace at that time. So everybody on this ship, they were very busy to get everything ready for to make the first strike. But there was one person who didn't pay attention to the war, and that was Carsten Niebuhr. Carsten, he was positioning his instrument to document a very rare phenomenon that occurred at that particular moment, and it was the planet Venus passing in front of the Sun. I think it's something very touchy about this scene. Everybody, the whole population on board, they were focused on the approaching enemy. But there was one person, the young astronomer. He looked in a different direction, and he saw something that nobody else on the ship saw. I like this scene because the role of us scientists is to be like Carsten Niebuhr and look in new directions. You can read about Carsten Niebuhr and his expedition in Torkel Hansen's book Arabia Felix. Free translation, Happy Arabia. And it's about the Danish expedition, science expedition, and expedition for exploring between 1761 and 1767. Torkel Hansen, the author, he also says, when he has described this scene, he says, and I quote, "Maybe it is these individuals who have had the courage to look in new directions that has made the world survive." And I think the need to look in new directions has probably never in history of us humans be as important or great as it is today. And why is it so? Yeah, I have in the abstract of my talk explained this, and I think that in our knowledge-based societies of today, we really emphasize use of research and innovation for wealth creation. And when we, in this context, talk about growth, we usually think of economic growth. But it's clear that the challenge goes well beyond that. It's actually about a sustainable future for a growing world population. The global threats that we see, they are enormous, with the global climate issue just being one expression of the today increasing and, in the long term, devastating over-exploitation of planet Earth. With its global dimensions, it has a magnitude that has never before been experienced by mankind. And I think it's fair to say that today we do not really have the technical or social solutions to these problems. But I'm pretty sure that it will be societies that emphasize research for new discoveries, for new ideas and new innovations that will foster the kind of ingenuity or creativity that is necessary to find rational solutions to these problems. So societies that will emphasize research and innovation well beyond what we so far have experienced, they really give us hope for the future. So my first message today is we should look in new directions to open up for the new opportunities, because we really need new opportunities. But Carsten Niebuhr, he also excused himself, saying that if the working conditions had been better, then the recorded data would have been more accurate. The ship was shaking during preparation for war, and the data became a little fuzzy. So then the next question is, do we give our scientists the optimal working conditions so they can, so their full potential can be expressed? And how can we better exploit the full potential of scientific research? That's two important questions. So in my lecture today, I will argue for a science policy that does not only emphasize research from a utilitarian perspective, which very much occurs with an established paradigm. I will argue for more of the kind of research that question accepted views and perspectives, research that look in new directions, research that has the potential to open up for new, unforeseen opportunities. In short, how to foster more groundbreaking research that may qualify for a Nobel Prize. Because this is what we need if our knowledge-based societies shall have a fair chance to successfully deal with present and future global challenges. So the next message, that is, as young scientists in your future career, you should look for nurturing and creative, really good research environments, because that's a way to optimize your research career. So these are the two messages I would like to elaborate on a little bit more. Challenge accepted views and perspectives and look in new directions in your research. And the other is that think of looking for environments that are nurturing, that are creative, and give you a fair chance to develop your full potential as a scientist. So I will now move on and discuss the nature of scientific research in relation to societal expectations, since I think it's important for you to be fully aware of this issue for your future career. During the 90s, I was Secretary General of the Swedish Natural Science Research Council, and every year the council published a book on a scientific theme. One year, the title of the book, it dealt with mathematics, and with free translation, the title was The Beautiful Tool of Mathematics. In this book, mathematics is defined both as a useful tool, but also as a beautiful art. And I think these two definitions very nicely summarizes the dual nature of scientific research. It is a very useful tool to solve problems, to focus research efforts towards identified social needs for new knowledge, with the objective of finding new solutions of technical or social nature. That is what we would call need-motivated or strategic research. Sometimes we even have a particular application in mind, and then we may use the term targeted or applied research. This kind of research is today often supported through various national programs of strategic importance. But scientific research as a beautiful art, it emphasizes its more rebellious nature of independence, with the individual freedom to challenge and question established views, to look into new paths into the future, and in that way open for the new unforeseen opportunities that cannot be predicted. This kind of research must be given the trust and the freedom to explore and question without any other reason than to open up for new knowledge and understanding. And to me, this is one of the cornerstones in a democracy, just in the same way as a free and independent media are. And I'm convinced that no society can over time excel in scientific research without encouraging encouraging this kind of freedom, the freedom of thought, of questioning and expression. We often name this kind of research blue sky research, curiosity-driven research, or simply basic research. In my talk today, I will use the terms targeted and basic research for the two types of research efforts. In order to justify the call for more targeted research, one today often hear that there is no real difference between basic and targeted research. And therefore, it's more profitable to invest in targeted research than in basic research. One has therefore launched the term frontier research to emphasize that both types of research can be of high quality by international standards. I fully agree that no sharp line can or should be drawn between the two types of research, since they are interdependent of each other. And many scientists, they appreciate to have one foot in each domain. But I think it blurs the picture not to recognize that over time, targeted and basic research work with different goals and different time perspectives. And therefore, the two types of research efforts have different needs when it comes to funding and organization of research. But I want to emphasize that these two natures of scientific research are complementary to each other, and neither of them can in the long term advance without the support of the other. Let me also take a more individual perspective that may help you reflect a little on what type of scientific character you may be. There is a paper called Creativity in Time and Space, written by Gunnar and in this paper he notices that it is the research entrepreneur who with great success leads the need-motivated, targeted or strategic research within what is an established paradigms. But it is the independent research pioneer who demand the freedom to look in new directions. New directions with a greater potential to open up for the unexpected opportunities. Törnqvist, he says in this article that from a science policy viewpoint, it's much more safe to put money on the research entrepreneur than on the research pioneer. And the reason is simple. It is that the entrepreneur is more visible, attracts a broader social response, and it's easy to measure progress month by month. The work of the pioneer is much more risky. It's full of failures, and the significance of the results may not be judged until maybe in a distant future. So therefore, it's much safer to put money on the entrepreneur than on the pioneer. I think it's fair to say that in our societies today, it's the pioneers who suffer while the entrepreneurs flourish. Entrepreneurs and pioneers are, of course, extreme caricatures of scientists. But I think that Törnqvist has a point when he emphasizes that the two characters are complementary because they create the basis for, on the one hand, efficiency and productivity, and on the other hand, the genuine creativity, which is a prerequisite for renewing and development in the long term. Törnqvist also argues that research needs to be elitistic, full of uncertainties and risks. The entrepreneur and the pioneer are both necessary for the progress of scientific research, and in unique cases, the two characters are combined in one and the same individual. And I think one can say such researchers, they are really worth their weight in gold. They are rather rare, but good research leaders, and many of you will become research leaders in the future, need to bring both categories into your research groups or institutions if one wants to make a real difference and become successful at the highest level. I think it can be valuable for you to reflect a little bit on what kind of position you will take here, being an entrepreneur or a pioneer, or both. I think we are lucky today, in a way, because the political interest in research and innovation has never in history received as strong support and broad interest as we see today. And this is true in both highly developed as well as in less developed countries. And I have 4 reasons to this development. There is an increasing political expectation that research and innovation will create prosperity and health. And we very often use the term knowledge-based economies when we want to describe this. There is also an increased call for evidence-based decisions in different sectors of the society's policies based on evidences. I talked about increasing global challenges that demand for, new solutions. And there is also an increased competition for talented scientists on the global market. However, this has consequences that we need to be aware of. And I think what we can see worldwide is that the free and curiosity-driven basic research becomes marginalized when more and more emphasis is put on strategic and targeted program research. We have an increasing demand for accountability and deliverables, and that reduces risk-taking. And the effect is that there is more focus on safe and specialized research now, I think, that what we see in order to meet these requirements in the short and medium term. And I think the risk is that this development reduces the renewal of creativity of scientific research when it comes to really open for the new opportunities that we are in, as I said, really need of today. Science policies in different countries are also very similar, and I think it's fair to say that today we have a tremendous, what we would call, bandwagon effect, where thousands of scientists all around the world flock around similar questions defined by very similar research strategies set at national levels. This has resulted in what we nowadays call incremental research. And it's characterized by high competition between researchers, high productivity, and also relatively high quality of data, I would say, but with a relatively short best before date. And it occurs very much within paradigms that has been well established. I think most of us actually do incremental research today. The room for high-risk, long-term challenge in science with the potential to make real breakthroughs, the room for such research is in many countries steadily shrinking. I think it's a need for a rebalancing between incremental science with short time perspectives towards more challenging, groundbreaking research with long time perspectives. And I think one can argue for that in view of social needs. In other words, our best scientists must be given the trust and resources to take risk and address more demanding questions. And that is why we must strengthen the condition for those who want and have the capacity to pursue basic research at of the highest distinction, aiming at making a real difference, making real breakthroughs in terms of discoveries and understanding. And I think simply we need more of Carsten Niebuhr type of scientists who are looking in new directions. And I think you are lucky that you have been and will be listening to Nobel laureates that have proved that you can be successful when you look in new directions and open up for new opportunities for science, technology, and society. So you hear many such good examples during this course. So there is a take-home message here for you, and I have summarized it here. I think the situation today is that we undermine the potential for scientific research worldwide as we put more and more emphasis on targeted and strategic program research directed towards applications within, I would call, established paradigm. We do so at the expense of curiosity and individually driven basic research, which has a higher potential to make new discoveries and open up for the unforeseen opportunities. In setting the science policy, one needs to consider the fact that these two types of research work with different goals and time perspectives. They are interdependent of each other, and neither of them can successfully advance over time without the other. So today we are worldwide weakening, as I see it, the power of science by supporting targeted research at the expense of basic research. At least I think we do so in Europe. And I think this is actually quite serious in a time when we really need to sharpen the instrument of scientific research. So that's how I see the situation today, and I think together we have to correct this kind of development. Now I'm shifting over to talk a little bit about the Nobel Prize. And I will concentrate on the Nobel Prizes in science. I think it's fair to say that the Nobel Prize today defines the highest benchmark for quality. It's given to those who have made a discovery, invention, or improvement of the greatest benefit to mankind. So before I get back to the issue of what kind of research environment favors and fosters groundbreaking research, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we work with the Nobel Prize and how we select the laureates. Well, first of all, this is Alfred Nobel, and he lived between 1833 and 1896. We are 4 Nobel Prize awarding institutions. It's the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, who is responsible for Nobel Prizes in physics and chemistry. To the family has been added an additional prize, Sveriges Riksbanks Prize in memory of Alfred Nobel. That's a memorial prize in economy, and that was launched in 1969. The Nobel Assembly at Karolinska Institutet is responsible for the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, and the Swedish Academy for the Prize in Literature, and the Norwegian Nobel Committee for the Nobel Peace Prize. The will is very explicit and clear. And the quality measure of Alfred Nobel, and as it is written in his will, is presented here. It's prizes to those who, during the preceding year, shall have conferred the greatest benefit to mankind. Person who shall have made the most important discovery or invention within the field of physics. person who shall have made the most important chemical discovery or improvement. And for the medical prize, person who shall have made the most important discovery within the domain of physiology or medicine. And then there are citations for the other prizes as well, but I leave that. You should notice here, it's not a lifetime achievement that is awarded. It's a discovery, invention, or improvement. And the quality criterion is set by should have conferred the greatest benefit to mankind. And I think that's the highest international quality criterion you can actually define. I could comment on a couple of things here. It said the prize should go to a person. We have changed that so we can give the prize to up to 3 persons that has contributed to a discovery, invention, or improvement. And the other thing is that in the will it says that this achievement should have been done during the preceding year. That's not a realistic attitude today. It takes time for new discoveries, invention, or improvements to show their importance. So normally, those who have made this great achievement will have to wait some time, sometimes maybe too long time, but it's a very competitive scheme. So how do we identify groundbreaking contributions and those who has made them? The Nobel Prize institution is unique in the world when it comes to prize awarding institution. And that is because we have an organization that all the time works on making field reviews, in this case physics and chemistry, field reviews with the focus on major breakthroughs in terms of discoveries, innovations, and improvements. And I would say there is probably no place in the world where we have a better understanding of how science develops in these fields over time, and we are really spotting out those areas where we see that here something may come, and when it has come, we really define it as a prizeworthy achievement. Then we have a nomination process, and we don't let anybody nominate. We try to keep up the quality of the nominations, so it is renowned institutions that are allowed to nominate. It's early Nobel laureates, it's members of the Academy, and then there is a selected number of outstanding individuals. And all these get letters. We send out about 3,000 letters per year asking for nominations. And we get some 400 nominations coming in every year. And nominations, they come in late February, and then the work starts to match the nominations with the field reviews that we have as a sort of matrix for our work. And this process goes on until the summer. And normally one works with 3, 4, 5 different areas which one think could be prizeworthy a particular year. And then the process moves on during the summer and during the fall up to the time in October when the Academy in Pleno makes a decision of what area to award, and also those people who should be awarded for having made the most significant contributions. A Nobel Prize contribution, it's very important that the discovery, invention, or improvement has opened new doors in science. We use the term change the way we think about things. And also, the prize should have wide consequences. Societal, technical, social, health, you can add it, character. That's important. So this is something we always carry in mind. Notice one thing. We don't pay any attention to national consideration. Nations do not exist in our work with the Nobel Prize. The Nobel everything is written down, and the Nobel archives are kept closed for 50 years before they are open to science historians. And I want to say that many scientists are worthy, but only a few can be awarded. And it's sometimes difficult to identify key researchers behind a particular discovery, and such a discovery may not be awarded. Theory only is also difficult to award according to the will, and very often the theory has to wait until the experiments have caught up and show that the theory was right. And I think in the 2008 physics prize that was shared between Professor Nambu, Professor Kobayashi, and Moscova is a good example of that. Nambu's theory had to wait for an award until Professor Kobayashi and Moscova had proved that he was right. So why is it so that the Nobel Prizes has become so prestigious? I think there are many reasons. It was the first international prize established. And this was a lot of concern in Sweden because one thought that this kind of prize should be national, not international. But anyhow, the will said that it should be international, and I think today we are very glad for that. The first prizes were given out in 2001, and it was Van Hoff who got the prize in chemistry, 1901. I mentioned the prize work. I'm proud to say that we have high quality of the prize work, and I don't think it's any prize in the world that put that much preparatory work in really following particular fields of science. And we can do that because Alfred Nobel, he put aside a substantial amount for the prize work, which I think is unique. And the quality criterion, consequence for mankind, is extremely important. Our best ambassadors, I think, is our laureates, the quality of our laureates, and the recognition they receive. I also think it's important that it's a broad spectrum that is awarded. It is science, as we talk about, it's medicine, it's literature, and peace. And this means that knowledge about the Nobel Prize and the interest for it is quite spread in the society. The Nobel Prizes today, after more than 100 years, is also at the core of science history. We can write textbooks in physics and chemistry just based on achievements by earlier laureates. Outreach activity has developed over time. Nobel Web, Nobel Media, Nobel Museum, example. Media coverage is very positive all around the world. And then we have the Royal Glory. That also helps broadening public interest. We have an award ceremony that is worth following, and then we have a nice banquet afterwards. And I have some pictures here showing what it looks like. This is in the concert hall, prize awarding ceremony, and here to the left is the laureates, here is the royal family, and here behind here is representatives of the various Nobel committees. Professor Noyori, Kobayashi, and Nigeshi here received their Nobel Prizes from the hands of His Majesty the King. And as I said, when we are finished with the prize ceremony, we are hungry, and then we gather in the City Hall, for a dinner, and it's about 1,400 guests. The various dishes are interrupted. There are intermissions with entertainment between each dish that is served. Now, the question is, we move on. What is required by a research system? What kind of research policy is required to develop such quality that may merit for a Nobel Prize or other highly prestigious prizes around the world? And we have many prestigious prizes. We have the Lasker Prize, we have the Crawford Prize, we have the Japan Prize, the Cosmos Prize, the Abel Prize, Kavli Prizes, Fields Medal, mathematics, and the list can be made much longer. You should notice here, and I repeat again, we are now talking about major discoveries, innovations, and improvements that give breakthroughs, new solutions that prove to become of benefit to mankind. We are not talking about generally highly productive, incremental science that follow the mainstream of research. We are really talking about research that changed the way we think about things. I have taken some help from a professor of sociology at University of Wisconsin, Professor Roger Hollingworth, and he has analyzed how major breakthroughs in biomedical science and chemistry are either facilitated or hampered by the organizational context in which the work is done. When you do this kind of consideration, you can of course not say that a particular organizational structure is needed for major discoveries to occur, since these kind of breakthroughs, they are rather rare events. But I think from his studies, we can still draw conclusion about where major discoveries are most likely to occur and where they are least likely to occur. Hollingworth has made a list of 5 points, which I think is extremely important that one considers in order to build an environment that is creative enough for these things to happen. He emphasizes very strongly, and at the top, the importance of scientific diversity in the environment. He says, we need a variety of interactive subdisciplines. We need the presence of highly qualified individuals who are at the front at using new emerging technologies. We need to bring in theoreticians as well as experimentalists. Having done this, it's extremely important that these people communicate and interact. Communication and interaction, that is a key word, and you have heard it from the lectures we have listened to during the preceding days. Because through communication and integration, you bring together different cognitive perspectives, and that is important. And you can do that in different ways. You can have simple journal clubs, you can have lunches together. Social interactions is also important. I think scientists like to socialize on a personal basis and also on scientific issues. Leadership capacity is extremely important. We need leaders for these units that has a strategic vision for integrating diverse areas of science and at the same time provide the focused research on very challenging topics. We need leadership that can secure long-term funding, and also very important, make strategic recruitment of scholars to the environment, simply in order to foster a critical but nurturing environment. And I like when Professor McKinnon yesterday described his difficulties when he wanted to take the step into study molecular structure, and a real strong leader in science stepped forward, namely an earlier Nobel laureate, Torsten Wiesel, at that time Vice Chancellor for the Rockefeller University, and said, well, come here. That is leadership. We need adaptiveness in a good environment. We need ways to process new knowledge that comes all the time among the actors from the different fields. We have to talk together about the development in science. And this is a way for open up for new ideas. We need organizational flexibility. And if an organization starts to idle, the leader has to regroup and go for more important, challenging questions. Well, what's hampering is the reverse. Differentiation into subdisciplines is very often counterproductive. Fragmentation is counterproductive when it comes to integration and discussions, which are very important to foster creativity. Hierarchical structure is also a problem when it comes to fostering this kind of interactive environments, and that hierarchies of that kind need to be fought all the time. Bureaucratic coordination should be at a minimum, and it should definitely not involve steps that has a negative effect on the daily scientific work. Diversity is a problem, as mentioned, because by diversity you also lose communication and you lose that mechanism in order to develop your research. Hollingworth also notices that major discoveries tend to take place in organizations which are quite small and of course also interactive, while large research universities, although they may perform extremely well in terms of being highly productive, maybe occasionally produce a breakthrough, such large universities do not produce major discoveries over and over again, as we have seen during the last 100 years in rather small environment. And he mentioned the Rockefeller Institute, now university, as a good example. Hollingworth also notices that during the 20th century, knowledge increasingly has become more complex. I think we can agree with that. And as this has occurred, research organizations have tended to differentiate knowledge into more and more departments, subspecialities, and the like. And in short, he says, and I want to read this because I think it summarizes very nicely what we have been talking about. He says, our research organizations have become increasingly fragmented. Scientists and scholars in large universities occupy very narrow niches. In these niches, small research teams with very similar background operate with a great deal of synergy. And this leads to a great deal of productivity. But if major discoveries are to occur, it's important that research teams have a great deal of scientific diversity. Major discoveries tend to occur in those settings where there are frequent and intense interaction among investigators from diverse fields of science. And organizations in which knowledge is very fragmented and differentiated in narrow niches are settings where major breakthroughs do not occur, even if the organizations are highly productive. I mentioned Gunnar Törnqvist, professor of economic geography in Lund. He has also been studying these kind of things, and he has mainly been looking at the individual scientist or artist, and his conclusion is a milieu of creativity therefore ought to be seen as a place, as places and institutions that attract human beings who possesses unique competence within different areas. And he also, as you see, emphasizes the interactive meeting place. He also focuses very much on the individual in the creative process. He points at the role of the home and the school in awakening and developing the individual's creativity. He also emphasizes the geographic mobility, because he says that geographic mobility enhances creativity among individuals. And I think he's right. Mobility seems to be a cornerstone for stimulating creativity. And we have a PhD thesis from Lund University written by Ola Tuvedsson. He has studied the mobility among Nobel laureates. And it's interesting to see that on average, a Nobel laureate has worked in 4.6 environments, and that means in university or institutes, before receiving the Nobel Prize. This is an average figure. And also interesting is to note that a Nobel laureate has on average had 7.4 other Nobel laureates as colleagues during a whole career. So Nobel Prizes seem to be contagious. And the reason to this can, of course, be discussed. But I think it emphasizes the role of being mobile, being interactive, being open for success. So knowledge and interaction, exchange of knowledge and ideas seems to be key elements for shaping creative environments that are brave enough to address important, groundbreaking questions, also having a fair chance to make discoveries, innovations, and improvements that may merit for a Nobel Prize. I want to add one more thing here, and that is the need for time perspectives that are long enough to allow for the creative process to work. And I was recently reminded by this during in connection with the prize awarding event, namely so that the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, together with the Royal Academies for Music and the Academy for Fine Art, we have a prize together. It's called the Rolf Schock Prize, and the prize awards eminent achievements in 4 different areas: mathematics, philosophy, visual art, and music. And the focus is creativity. In 2008, I chaired a press conference with the laureates, and the mathematician Endre Stemerede is here. This is Gideon Kramer, musician, Mona Hattem, visual art, and Thomas Nagel, philosophy. And when the question from the journalist started to dry out, I thought that I had to come up with some question that could be of some relevance, and I asked them what new media of communications meant for them. Internet, rapid communication, they could connect to colleagues and so on. And they all 4 shook their heads and they say, Internet means nothing for our creativity. And they said, all 4 of them, they emphasized that time was the most important for their developing their creativity. I don't think they were against Internet, and I think they saw the value of Internet. But really, they emphasized we need time to think and work. That helps us to be creative. And I think these Lord Schock laureates, they gave a very important message. And if they are right, and I think they are, the increasing demand to deliver in the short to medium term That undermines creativity and quality in scientific research. And the prevailing scheme with the competitive short-term project funding, that may, again, produce research that is productive, but hardly the kind of breakthrough that we are talking about. We need long-term perspectives. That's an important prerequisite for groundbreaking research to develop. We need to put trust in our best scientists. What I have said here about creativity and the environment has a very strong reference in what the 2009 Nobel laureate in chemistry, Professor Venki Ramakrishnan, writes in his autobiography in a book we call Pre-Nobel. He describes the environment of the Medical Research Council Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge, which is a research environment which repeatedly has produced Nobel laureates, and Professor Walker is a speaking example of that. Ramakrishnan describes the lunchroom on the 5th floor as a meeting place for new thoughts and ideas in a relaxed atmosphere. He also writes, and I want you to read this, there were 2 other important lessons I learned at the LMB. I found that almost nobody there was working on routine problems just because they would lead to publishable results. Rather, they were trying to ask the most interesting questions in their field and then developing ways to address them. The other lesson was that even very famous scientists would ask questions at seminars that were often trivial to people in the field. And that reinforced in me the feeling that ignorance is not something to be ashamed of, and that no question is too stupid to ask if you want to know the answer. With that attitude, I think you can create a very good dialogue across disciplines. Well, to finish off, while you now have a look at Alfred Nobel, I think he lived in the 19th century, and I think we can say that he was a scientist. He was a chemist, as you know. He was a scientist. He was an engineer. He was an entrepreneur. He also was a businessman. There were 100 factories around the world carrying the name Nobel. And Alfred Nobel, he had 355 patents. So he was really a very active scientist. And I want to finish by saying that for you who are still young, and you are planning for a scientific career, we can just hope that your school and upbringing has not only given you knowledge, but also awakened and developed your creativity by using your knowledge. In addition, to maximize your scientific career, now and after your PhD, you should look for postdoc training in nurturing, interactive environments where people are encouraged to engage in high-risk research, not being hindered in their research by having to continuously prove themselves by applying for research grants all the time. You should also, if you want to aim high, avoid environments where you become a workforce to help your supervisor produce research results that are good enough to merit for an extension of the grant. In such an environment, you may be productive, but do not expect to be part of a major scientific breakthrough. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor ÖQUIST. The lecture covered a very wide range of topics which probably people with different backgrounds could enjoy. And it was very encouraging, I suppose, for young students gathering here. Now we move on to the discussion session. Does anybody want to ask questions or make comments? And before addressing questions or comments, could you just tell your name, country, affiliation, or specialty, of those things?
Thank you so much for your wonderful speech. My name is Ren Dong. I'm Chinese, and now I'm studying here in Japan, in Kyoto University. Okay, regarding the Nobel Prize, I think in recent years with the development in computer science, so many people think that the Nobel Prize should set a prize for the computer science. So how do you think about that?
You think there should be a...
I have another question.
Okay.
Is we all know that the Nobel Prize level goes to the field of mathematics, right? And there are many stories. Can you give us your understandings and explanations? Thank you so much.
Well, your question is if there can be a Nobel Prize in computer science. My answer is no. There won't be any more Nobel Prizes. The Nobel Prizes are defined in Alfred Nobel's will. We have added one memorial prize that is in economics, but that won't happen again. Then, why is there not a Nobel Prize in mathematics? We can only speculate on that, of course. First of all, in the 19th century, I don't think the mathematics was all that international. It was a strong push to make mathematics more international. But Alfred Nobel is an experimentalist. I don't think that he had mathematics on top of his mind. I think that is one of the reasons. And at that time, physics and chemistry were really the emerging scientists. And he was also very worried about his health, and he followed very closely the advancement in the health field, medical field. So it's along that line, it's very natural that he focused on these three science disciplines. There have been speculations that Swedish mathematician Gösta Mittag-Leffler and Alfred Nobel were all both dating the same girl, and that she chose to marry Mittag-Leffler, and that it was a revenge, not by Alfred, not to set up a prize in mathematics. That is just made up. That's not true. As a matter of fact, both Gösta Mittag-Leffler and Alfred Nobel, they were not enemies. They communicated, and they were good friends.
Thank you very much.
Any other? Okay, over there, please.
Thank you so much. I am Shaheen from Egypt, studying in Tohash University. I am asking about your first message. Look in new directions to open up for new opportunities. As a young researcher, I think there is a gap between some governments and their researchers. How to overcome this gap?
Yeah, that's what we are all working on. That is a challenge. I'm working on it in my own country, and I think we need to keep on conveying the message that in order to really be successful in the scientific research endeavor, you need to have both. You cannot only have short-term perspectives, you also need to have long-term perspectives, because it is through the long-term perspectives and giving trust to your best researchers to pursue challenging projects. That's the way to make really new discoveries. And then you can elaborate on those discoveries and from there gradually build on more knowledge. But you need both short and long-term research. You need curiosity-driven research and utilitarian-driven research and innovations. But we simply have to work on this. And I can tell you, right now I'm, for my academy, studying this issue in Sweden and comparing Swedish science with some European countries that do better in breakthrough science than Sweden is doing. And my task is now to, through these comparative studies, see how can we maybe develop a more evidence-based science policy that we then can suggest to our politicians. So we need to work on it.
And what do you think about the relation between the education system and such kind of gap? Because in some countries the gap is so much. The government never listens to the researcher.
Yeah,
what do you think about the education system?
No, I definitely think that university professors in their education can convey this message that you need different type of research in society, both long-term and short-term. And, you know, if people at large understand what's required in a democracy, then the politician may be more brave and go for more long-term funding of research.
For research or something.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. We have some time for a few more questions. Okay, please, over there.
Thank you, Professor ÖQUIST. Mette Nielsen from New Zealand, chemical ecology. I was just wondering, when we saw that picture, there's obviously quite a few members on the committee. How and who are these people who end up on these committees for the Nobel Prizes?
How people end up on the committee?
Like, I mean, I know you're one of them, but who are the rest and how do they get elected to be in the committee, for example?
I have never been on a committee because I'm not a physicist, I'm not a chemist, I'm a biologist, so I'm disqualified to sit on the committee as an expert. I have followed the processes and I have been responsible for the operation. The committees are pretty small. It's 6-7 people, and they are all members normally of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. According to the statutes, they don't have to be members of the Academy, but in reality, they are members. So it is Swedish scientists in physics and chemistry that sit on the committee. They are appointed for 3 years. The term is renewable. They can sit for maximum 9 years. But it's not only these 6 people who do the job. They use a system for field review. They use experts all over the world. And very often take in views from very many different people. So we keep lots of science around the world busy in these field reviews of science. So what the committees do very much, besides using their own expertise, they compile, they interpret, they make judgment based on the reviews that have come in, and then they sort of make a statement on where a particular field stands at a particular moment when it comes to development.
Okay, so we are going to conclude this session because lunchtime is already. It's supposed to start at 11:40, so we are already 10 minutes behind. That's all right. So we can still continue discussion during the lunchtime. And let's conclude this session with a big hand for Professor.
Thank you very much.